Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Daily Arsenal Podcast, brought to you as part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. It's Thursday, which would normally mean a crossover episode. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to get that sorted in time, so I'm here very, very late on Wednesday night, recording a quick reaction to some of the big news that has happened this week. And there's only one place that we can really start. Goodison Park this evening hosted its final Merseyside derby as Everton took on league leaders Liverpool in a 7:30 kickoff at the old famous ground. Now Liverpool, before this game, 6 points ahead of us, Arsenal, and they had this as a game in hand. So if they won it, they could go to 9. The final result, it's a massive game for Liverpool and for Arsenal. Liverpool 2, Everton 2. Incredible result for the Gunners and also for Everton. Fair play to them. And it did not disappoint. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole game, but I've just watched the highlights and I'm looking at the match report now. And it was chaos. Beto opened the scoring after a really, really smart free kick from Branthwaite, which set him through. Really tidy finish under Alisson. Then Liverpool replied 5 minutes later with Alexis McAllister, a great glancing header from Mo Salah. Salah then put them ahead 2-1 with a sort of instinctive finish after a clearance from an Everton player. But then, in the, that's a red card. In the 98th minute, the ball bounces around the Liverpool box, falls at the far post to an unmarked, completely open James Tarkowski, who volleys the ball first time into the top right-hand corner, causing absolute scenes at Goodison Park, meaning that Liverpool drop points, which is huge. If they won this game in hand, we could effectively write the season off. But they have dropped points, which is massive. It then as well descended into carnage at the full-time whistle. Doucouré went over and celebrated in front of the travelling Liverpool fans. Curtis Jones went over and had some choice words for him, and I believe some fists. They both got sent off, and then Arne Slot also got sent off in the scrap and the melee. It was absolute pure carnage. But this is the Arsenal podcast. It's the Daily Arsenal. What does this actually mean for Arsenal Football Club going forward? Well, it means a couple of things. First of all, Liverpool have used up their game in hand. It's 24 apiece now, every single team having played 24. When we look at Everton, it means they're now 10 points clear of the drop zone, which rather irritatingly, throws my prediction kind of out the window. At the start of the season, I did suggest that Sean Dyche might get dropped, and he did indeed. But Everton, at the moment, look likely survivors. They're in a strong place ever since David Moyes came back to the club. Since he did, their current form is 3 wins and a draw in their last 4 games. So it's exactly matches Liverpool's form in the last 4 games. So quite remarkable stuff there. But the big news, really, the sort of news which is consequential to us here at the Daily Arsenal podcast, is that Liverpool have dropped points. They could have gone 9 points clear of Arsenal after this game. They are now 7. Now, that is it's still 3 games worth of points that they need to drop and we need to maintain. It's still an awful lot of work to do. An awful lot of work. And there's no guarantee that Liverpool will keep dropping points because they're a machine. However, from the reporting that I've read throughout the evening, and I've seen bits and bobs as I've sort of travelled home after work this evening, it sounds as though Everton were the better side, and Liverpool, as they kind of have done a little bit recently, have been struggling. I mean, Liverpool got knocked out of the the FA Cup by Plymouth. Fair play to Plymouth, who unfortunately they've got Man City now. But if we look at the stats here, admittedly, it's a derby. Anything can happen in a derby. It's a Merseyside derby. But Everton had more shots than Liverpool. They had almost equal shots on target. It was 3-4. Blocked shots, it looked as though Everton's defenders were on a mission. They blocked 2 shots each side. 3 attempts from outside the box for Everton, only 2 for Liverpool. Generally, in terms of the actual offensive output, Everton look as though they dominated Liverpool in most fields. They also did in terms of tackles, won tackles, Clearances, headed clearances, they dominated Liverpool in those statistics as well. And when we look at the percentage, it's kind of what you'd expect from a Liverpool-Everton fixture in this sense. Liverpool had 63% of the ball. Everton had 37%. So possession was very heavily in Liverpool's favour. The XG, neither of them had an XG over 1, so 2-2 is quite a what's the word I'm looking for? Quite a flattering score for both sides. But it's huge for us. It means that it's not a huge window of opportunity for Arsenal, but it means there's something there. It means that there is a chance that Arsenal now can push forward with some momentum and really chase down this title. Because if it was 9 points, especially play like 24 games played, there's 38 games in the season, so there's 14 games left. 9 points is a hell of a mountain to climb. 7 is still a lot. 7 is still a big mountain of points to climb and attempts to try and reach that summit, but it's manageable. It is, at least psychologically, it feels far more manageable than 9 points would have done. So this result, it's huge at the bottom of the table. It's huge at the top, but also it's rather fitting that the very, very last Merseyside derby at Goodison Park, and Goodison Park, for those who are sort of coming into especially English football a little bit later, maybe not as versed with all of the nuances of English football. Goodison Park is one of the oldest grounds in the country. Everton are one of the oldest and most prestigious clubs in the country, and the Merseyside derby is one of the biggest games of the season every season that the two are in the similar league. It's a game that every non-Merseyside fan looks forward to as much as Liverpool fans and Everton fans are terrified of it happening. It's a phenomenal game. Admittedly, Goodison it's in a rough state. I think it's over 100 years old, Goodison Park. It's an old stadium. To say it needs ripping down is harsh, but Everton needs something else. And they're moving to a brilliant new stadium. It looks like they'll be in the Premier League to celebrate with it as well. And it's fitting that the last Merseyside derby at that stadium involves 3 red cards and 4 goals. It's everything you want from a football game. Goals and red cards. And like I say, it opens up an opportunity for Arsenal to push forward. At least it would do if it wasn't for the news that we're going to discuss just after this break. Arsenal fans, brace yourselves. I'm sure you know this already, but our situation has gone from not great to, oh, good God. So we'll be back just after this message from Zencastr. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spend a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. And welcome back to the Daily Arsenal Podcast. It's me, your host, Josh Vince. It's just me tonight because it is a particularly late one. Come home relatively late this evening, but we thought we'd get something out for you before we do any focus on Leicester at the weekend. We've talked about the fact that Liverpool have dropped points, which is huge for us, especially with that game in hand, and it's time for Arsenal to capitalise on it. However, it might be difficult to capitalise on the situation because, as I'm sure many of you will have read, to be honest, if you're listening to this, you're likely an Arsenal fan. You likely have a vague idea of what's going on at the club. So if you are an Arsenal fan and you keep up to date, you've probably heard this news already. But, we'll bring it to you just in case you haven't. In case you're unaware, Kai Havertz could miss the rest of the season. This is news that at Arsenal's Dubai warm winter training camp, Kai Havertz, our main focal point in attack, the player who, don't get me wrong, we all give him a rough time on the podcast, but it's inevitable that inevitable is the wrong word. It would be stupid to say that he doesn't do a massive job for Arsenal. He's also one of our top goal scorers and probably the most pivotal individual, apart from Odegaard, in the press that Arsenal play with, has torn his hamstring, supposedly. Now, as Matt said on our group chat when this was announced yesterday, to tear a hamstring is a hell of a thing to do. And it's happened twice to Arsenal this season. But it's also worth bearing in mind that the situation that this puts Arsenal into currently is the back four is starting to get fit again, just about. Well, about 2 of our 27 left backs are now fit. Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and then Calafiori or Miles Lewis-Skelly, they're all okay. The midfield is starting to come into shape again. Odegaard's finding his feet. Our starting front line is gone. It has been eviscerated by injury. I'm, of course, talking about Bukayo Saka, who's been already out since early December, and he's not due back until mid-March. Gabriel Martinelli, who is out as well with injury. We discussed that on yesterday's podcast, in fact. And now the centre of that front three, Kai Havertz, is injured, reports suggesting for the rest of the season. Which means that currently, in a situation when Liverpool have dropped points, they look to be struggling a little bit with their form, probably a bit overworked. At the point where Arsenal should be pushing on, really going for it in terms of title, and then when March kicks back in Champions League, none of our first front three are fit. None of them. Not what. What are they feeding or putting in the boys' bodies at Colney? Because they are dropping like flies constantly. And this, we've talked about it on the pod a number of times. Discussions between us all about the state of the game and the issue with injuries this year in particular. I mean, I don't like giving them credit because they're our derby rivals, but Spurs have been devastated by defensive injuries. Manchester City have constant injury crises going on there. Real Madrid even, I mean, we'll come to the game at the end of this episode, but Real Madrid have massive injury problems. There are so many teams in the Premier League who are struggling with injuries. Arsenal is one of them. We've had massive ones throughout the season. We lost Odegaard, we lost Rice, we lost Calafiori, we lost big players. And now Saka, Martinelli and Havertz are all out at the same time, which is almost unprecedented. I cannot remember a time, especially definitely in Arsenal's history, but also generally in the Premier League, when all of a team's front three offensive options were injured simultaneously. It's unheard of. And then, to top it all off as well, in December, what happened to Gabriel Jesus? ACL, out for the season. So we don't even have the backup of Gabriel Jesus, which means, and we were talking about this on the group chat yesterday, just in shock as to what's going on. Our likely front three lineup now is probably Sterling on the left, Trossard down the middle, and Nwaneri on the right. So that's an 18-year-old, a player who's better as an impact sub and is not a natural centre forward, and an older player who has struggled for form, struggled for any sort of consistency at the club on a loan move from a disaster at Chelsea. That's now our best front three. That's absurd. Absolutely absurd. Especially when you factor in that the club was in a position to put in a £60 million bid for Ollie Watkins. And in the winter transfer window, I know it's hard to do deals in January, but we signed no one. No cover in the front lines whatsoever. So we're relying now on a front three, which is a mishmash. And getting consistency out of them, getting a flow out of them is going to be a nightmare. The Arsenal board have to look at themselves. Jamie said it on yesterday's pod. I think Rodney mentioned it as well. It's like the football gods, karma cursing us for not signing anybody in January. And that was just with Martinelli. Now we've lost Havertz too. And honestly, we've struggled offensively this season anyway. We've been a lot more stale this season going forward. We need all of those options available to us to try and create things. We've seen how much we suffered without Saka for periods. Then we finally start getting into a groove. Then we lose Martinelli. Looks a little bit shaky. Then we lose Havertz as well. And all of that with Gabriel Jesus out too. It is a disaster of an unprecedented level and entirely of the board's own making. How they can sit there and justify the money that they are on, the directors of football, the technical directors, all of those, how they can sit there and justify the money they're on, when now, as a club, we are in a situation when we have none of our preferred 4 forwards fit. When we've just come out of a transfer window where we clearly had money to do things and there were cheaper options out there, they did nothing. Loan moves have gone through. I mean, he's not brilliant, but João Felix, he's gone out on loan. There was a loan move as well for a big player. I can't remember. I'm too angry right now. There are loan moves that have happened. There are lower transfers that have happened. Kvaratskhelia we could have afforded, and he's a quality winger. There are so many things Arsenal could have done in this January transfer window. And now we are in a position where we are utterly and totally screwed because of ineptitude at the top of the club. I don't blame Arteta for this because he's come out and said how disappointed he was. I blame the people who are getting absurd amounts of money at the top of that club, at the top of the technical hierarchy, who couldn't be asked to pull their fingers out and actually sign a forward player, which for 18 months we have needed. It wasn't needed just in January. It wasn't needed just in the summer. It was needed before that as well. We needed offensive reinforcements. We spent big money on other players, but we needed offensive reinforcements. And did they do it? Did they bugger? I'm sorry, that was a big rant. I'm not best pleased about this situation because it's an absurd situation. It's bonkers. Like I say, I cannot remember it happening at any point in recent history. And now Arteta is left with a headache. I think we were joking about Kieran Tierney being played on the left wing. That looks like that might happen now. There's a good chance he'll get some game time. Or we have to change. Go for a front 2. But even then, you know, Trossard could potentially play as a forward, as in a front 2. But Sterling, I wouldn't put in a centre forward role. Or Wanyeri, that's asking too much of a young player. It's just maybe put Gabriel up front. To hell with it. He's good in the air. There's going to be lots of balls coming in. Tierney on the left wing, Gabriel up front. To hell with it. Give Kivior some starts. It's ludicrous. Honestly, it's absolutely ludicrous. There's not really much more I can say on that. You know, I've mentioned how much I blame the hierarchy, and I think that's where the big problem is. So that's the Havertz situation that we're in at the moment. That's my 2 cents on it. I'm looking forward to getting the guys' 2 cents on it as well when we're back with everybody. We're going to take a quick break now, and we're just going to shoot through some of the Champions League results, seeing as it is important to us, because we will be playing someone in the Champions League, obviously, after these group stages are done. So we'll be back just after this message from the Global Sports Podcast Network. Sorry for shouting.
This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football, and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day.
Welcome back to the Daily Arsenal Podcast. It's our Thursday sort of bonus episode where we've been looking at the Liverpool result and the absolute disaster of the club's transfer policy and Kai Havertz getting injured for the remainder of the season. I've calmed down a little bit now, and we're going to look forward to the Champions League because it has been going on this week. I'm recording this very late on Wednesday. Well, actually, I think it's Thursday morning now. Tuesday and Wednesday evening, there were Champions League games, and there were some crackers. Got to watch one of them, and I think it was a phenomenal game of football. On Tuesday, Real Madrid, Manchester City at the Etihad. Real Madrid beating City 3-2. City were 2-1 up with like 7 minutes to play, and they still ended up losing. They just cannot maintain control of games. It's a disaster for them at the moment, and it means very much advantage Madrid going into the Bernabeu with a lead now. 2-2 would have been great going to the Bernabeu. 3-2 going to the Bernabeu for Real Madrid. It looks as though the champions are they're still fighting. You can't ever write them out of this competition. Dortmund beat Sporting as well on Tuesday. 3-0. It was pretty convincing. PSG beating Brest 3-0. That was a really disappointing fixture, Brest getting PSG. I feel like Brest have been hard done by there because they were such good fun in the Champions League, and then they get picked with somebody in their own league and who is a massive household name. So it's a bit of a wet fart way for them to go out. But what we really need to be focusing on is Arsenal's potential challengers. So Arsenal, we finished in the top 8, so we automatically qualify for the last 16, which means we'll be playing one of 4 teams. We'll be playing either Feyenoord, Juventus, AC Milan, and PSV Eindhoven. Now, I'm pretty sure that I said when this was announced, the team that I would want us to play more than any would be Feyenoord, because Juve, scary, AC Milan, Juve and AC Milan, both scary Italian teams. Juve don't lose much. They draw a lot, but they don't lose much. So it'd be really hard in a knockout competition to take them down. PSV are a nasty team. They're just awkward and difficult. Feyenoord are a very, very, very good team, but of the bunch of them, they're probably the ones that I would fancy us against most. Now, on Tuesday night, Juve versus PSV. Juve beat PSV 2-1 in their first leg. Goals from Weston McKennie and Mbangula. Oh, goodness me, sorry about that. Mbangula got them the victory, with Perisic getting one for PSV. I actually quite like that result because as much as I did just say Juve, they draw a lot, they're hard to beat, PSV scare me more. It's just something about the way they play football is incredibly hard to break down, and they are the sort of team that Arsenal struggle against. Whereas Juventus, I think we could potentially unpick. Then that left Wednesday's games. So Wednesday, there were some really interesting results here. Benfica beating Monaco 1-0. Bayern Munich did beat Celtic, but only 2-1 at Celtic Park. Celtic is still in that game, and they go to the Allianz next Tuesday. That'll be a game to watch. Club Brugge as well, beating Atalanta at home. That's a massive reverse fixture now next week. But the game that we're interested in, Feyenoord versus AC Milan. Now, you look at that fixture and you think there's only really one winner, AC Milan. In this fixture, Feyenoord beat AC Milan 1-0. Paixão, the goal scorer, in the 3rd minute. It's a slender victory, but it's a victory, and it was a home victory. So AC Milan are going to take them back home and play against them, probably play very, very well. However, I think those two results, Juve getting a 2-1 win over PSV and Feyenoord holding a 1-0 result over AC Milan, I think they're good results for the Arsenal. If only we had some forward players who we could punish them with. Sod it, I'm still angry. I'm still angry about the Havertz situation. I'm still angry about the lack of cover. It's been one of those couple of days with Martinelli and Havertz being taken out. I'm just livid. And I think I should probably end it on that note before I say something that I really shouldn't do on this podcast. So that is it. Thank you very much for listening. Obviously a bit shorter today, but it was a bit of an emergency late night podcast. We'll be back on Friday, hopefully with the guys from Leicester. If not, we'll be doing our own little look into the Leicester fixture. Until then, have a wonderful time. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. And from myself, Josh, Vince, and all of us at the Daily Arsenal podcast, goodbye.
Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.